Welcome to the Daily Commercial Forum. I'm your host, Sandy Moore. For those with learning disabilities, it can be difficult to excel in school and go beyond with future education. However, Beacon College helps students with learning disabilities to achieve their dreams. Today, our guests from Beacon College are Dr. Shelley Chandler, Vice President of Academic Affairs, and Brenda Melly, the Director of Admissions. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, let's just start out, and Shelley, tell us a little bit about Beacon College.
All right, Beacon College is a four-year college that's accredited by the Southern Association of Colleges. We've been accredited for 10 years. We currently have about 186 students, and we serve students that have ADHD. About 56% of our students have ADHD and learning disabilities.
So the criteria for being a student there is that you have to have one or the other?
Correct.
Or both?
No, one or the other, or some have both.
Or both.
Yeah. Some have multiple.
Well, and tell us a little bit about when you say learning disabilities, what are those? I mean,
Well,
identify some.
I'll start out, Brenda, and then you can join in. Some of them that our students have are language disorders, reading disorders, math disorders, auditory processing disorders.
Like dyslexia?
Dyslexia is a reading disorder.
Things like that.
Dyscalculia is a math disorder. Mm-hmm. Receptive and expressive language disorders.
Yeah, written expression disorders, and with dyslexia, it even breaks down further than just the broad category as well. Same with math. So we'll have students that will have varying, difficulties with reading. So, for example, some students have a hard time with the basic reading skills, so the word identification, but some students can read, and it sounds like they're reading it just fine, but it's the comprehension that's more difficult for them. So
now, are there other colleges around that are like Beacon, or?
We're pretty unique. There is another college in Vermont called Landmark that now has a four-year program. We were the only ones in the nation right up to a few months ago. So we had the corner on the market, and we still believe we will have the corner on the market.
And we do offer right now 4 different bachelor degree programs.
What are those?
We have human services, psychology, computer information systems, which has 2 tracks, both a digital media track and an traditional IT track. Then we also have our interdisciplinary studies, which formally, and a lot of people know it as liberal studies, like your traditional college degree.
It can be just in any.
Kind of heavy on literature and history.
Mm-hmm.
Now, tell me, because Beacon College has been here for 20 years, you said?
Yes,
Is that right?
Since 1989, so about 24, 23.
Yeah.
And what would you say is probably the biggest misconception about Beacon College? Either one of you want to.
Go ahead, Hannah.
I think the biggest misconception starts with the misunderstanding of what a learning disability is. I think a lot of people think a learning disability might have something to do with the person's ability to, overall intelligence, but the reality is we have smart students. We have students that have average IQ or above, so average cognitive functioning or above, a lot above, and their difficulty is just one aspect. It's a little hiccup. I think learning disabilities are often misunderstood, whereas a physical disability, such as having poor vision, is better understood. With poor vision, a basic accommodation is glasses or contacts. With our students, they're intelligent students. They just need accommodations to be able to help them to complete their goal of gaining a college degree.
And I always, it's interesting because I work in the downtown area near Beacon College, and people will talk to me a little bit about the college, and I'm quick to say, well, it's an accredited school, like you mentioned, but I also am quick to say, I had a learning disability. I could have been a student at Beacon College. So really there's a normal face to that in general, that maybe people don't always necessarily recognize.
Right.
Now, do all the professors have special training in teaching children or kids, I shouldn't say they're really not children, they're adults, with learning disabilities?
Yeah, most of our instructors have, first of all, a doctorate. So they have a terminal degree in their subject matter. So for example, if they're teaching history, they have a PhD in history. But then they also go through an extensive training program when they join Beacon College. For their first semester, they have a weekly session where they learn the skills needed to function in a classroom for students with learning disabilities.
I went through the faculty mentoring program, and my training is in school psychology. So I actually used to evaluate and diagnose students with learning disabilities and ADHD, and then also provide interventions. I had never taught them, though, and I learned a lot in the faculty mentoring program. It really opened up my eyes at what to do in the classroom.
So just so that people can get a real good vision of what it is or what it's like to be at the college, what does this mean? I mean, we're talking smaller class size. What else?
Well, at the core of it, we have a learning model that we use in every classroom. So it's a lot of active involvement of the students. So they're not just sitting in their chairs listening to a lecture. So they have to apply what they're learning, and it could be, if it's psychology, they could be working with children on the floor of the classroom. They could be, we bring in dogs when we can apply anything psychologically. I come from a psychology background, so we might apply, the old classical conditioning, which involves dogs, and we bring the dogs into the classroom and have them see it in real life. And it's so much easier for them to understand and to remember when we can apply it that way. So we have this learning model that we all use. It really is a good group of people because we share things, and what might work for Brenda, she might share with me, so it would help me in my class, things like that.
And I think a real asset of our learning model is that we don't ever just do 50 minutes of straight lecture. There's always at least 3 different modalities that we are incorporating into each class meeting. So it's not an auditorium of 400 students and the professor droning on about, we always have different activities going on, and like Shelley said, experiential learning activities, hands-on, which makes sense because we all learn better that way. I mean, we remember the times when we went on a field trip, or we remember the classes where we did something.
Right. What a difference it is to see pictures of Washington, D.C., or actually go to Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
with what you're doing. Now, does it ever change depending on who is actually in the class? I mean, does it, so if a teacher's looking and you have, say, 4 students, and when I went to a college where we had, when you had your majors, when you're in your major classes, we might have had 4 students even in my college. Right. But does it change? We know that Susie over here has a learning disability or learns more audibly, or does that change? Or
it does somewhat, but we try to teach to all modalities, so we continually shift. So we might have a visual presentation, and then an auditory, and then a hands-on activity in the class to kind of combine them all and to include everybody. But if most of our classes, the average class size is about 12. So you're going to get a mix in each class, typically.
And so you're just trying to make sure you hit all of them.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit more about some of the maybe special programs that help the students.
Well, we're really proud of a lot of our services that we have. The Writing Center, for example, is a really nice facility where students can go to get help with writing. Last year, for example, we had 5,300 visits. Our little school, back then it had 154 students, but we had 5,300 visits to that Writing Center. So they're getting a lot of help. They're getting ideas. They're brainstorming with faculty members there. And
is this like creative writing? Is this what we're talking about?
It's anything that has to do with writing. So maybe they have a paper due in one of Brenda's psychology classes. They could go to the Writing Center and have it proofread, or just brainstorm, or with the writing consultants that work there.
And we have a lot of assistive technology in the Writing Center that provides those accommodations for our students, just like the person who has is vision impaired, uses glasses. We have assistive technology in the Writing Center that, for example, might be a screen reader, so it'll read what is on the computer screen to the possibly dyslexic student. Or for students who might have difficulty with written expression, We have a assistive technology program for that too, so that they can speak and speech to text. So.
Well, you know, it's interesting that you say that too, because I remember when I was growing up, I always had a hard time with, you know, spelling was just, I never could get it. I just couldn't get it.
Right.
And so when I would write, though, I would only write the words that I could spell.
Right.
So if you were to read my stuff, you would think this girl has no vocabulary whatsoever.
Right.
You know, because I would write, you know, cat or dog. I mean, little, you know,
Sure,
and whereas,
right.
but knowing, you know, that I had a bigger vocabulary because, you know, being able to do some of those things would be.
Yeah,
Right.
we have a program called WordQ that you would have really liked because it helps with spelling and coming up with those words that you can't come up with.
Right.
It's that predictive text. So they start typing in just a couple letters, and it's better than, say, on your cell phone, because a whole list comes up and you can move the cursor. It doesn't just guess one.
One, right. Which I am so grateful for spell check, the computers,
Yes.
because we didn't. I was right on that verge right before computers really hit
Right.
in my learning experience. It would be a whole nother world for me now. I know. So other things, you know, even on the interpersonal level, I know you have some programs for the students.
We do. We have a counseling center with licensed mental health counselors, so students can go there for any issues they might be having, if they're homesick or whatever the case may be. We also have life coaching. It's new this year at Beacon College, and so it's kind of a proactive system. So if a student's having difficulty in the apartments, you know, in residential life, they have that life coach available. That life coach lives on campus with them in the apartments, so that's kind of neat. We have a math lab for those students that have math disabilities. And our math instructor says they all have them. You know? It's not just a select group, but they all have some type of math disability, she says. So it's a really cool place where they can go and just you know, work at their own pace and get the extra help they might need.
And I think one of the major cornerstones of our model and what we do is our learning specialists, or our
Yes,
learning specialists.
definitely.
They are amazing, and every student is assigned. It's not an additional fee. They don't have to ask for it. They are assigned a learning specialist at the beginning of the year. They have a meeting time once a week with the learning specialist that's set, and that specialist helps them to organize, make goals, prepare for deadlines. So it's really helping with kind of that executive functioning part of the brain that maybe mom and dad had been doing for the past 18 years, but now they have a specialist who really helps them to be able to prepare and be set up for success.
Well, now, I know that in really probably any college, there are programs out there to help kids if they have learning disabilities and they're in the college. What is it that Beacon College really does for these kids? I mean, how does this differ from being at another college like that and just getting help from, you know, tutors and different things like that?
Well, I think one of the main things we do is we make the student more self-aware. That's incorporated into our learning model, so in every class they're becoming more self-aware.
Right.
And they take particular classes that they have to research their own disability and present it in some format to their class. And they really become more self-aware. They learn more compensation strategies, you know, how they can cope better with this disability that they have.
That's one of the things I really loved about Beacon. When my very first semester of working at Beacon, actually Shelley was my boss, and it was the first time I'd ever worked somewhere where they encouraged us to help with our students' self-awareness and personal development. And we have, like Shelley said, courses within the curriculum that every student's required to take to help with understanding their learning disability and then also personal development. And I went to a large state school for my undergrad. I loved it. I studied psychology like Shelley. Absolutely loved it, but I always thought something that was missing was a class where we're kind of focused on ourselves. We're going, you know, we're studying about theory, but we have to apply it. And where do you apply it first? Yourself.
Right.
And be successful. You know, personal development helps, you know, lead to successful professionals.
Well, and I would say that when you're in this kind of an environment, when you have the smaller class sizes, obviously an awareness to exactly what's happening. Because I know when I went off to college, I didn't have to tell anybody I had a learning disability. I mean, it wasn't in the
Right.
you know, in anything. You're there's probably fewer chances for people to kind of fall through the cracks,
Absolutely.
Right.
so to speak. And that's probably part of your claim to fame as well.
Exactly, exactly.
And I can explain a little bit about this. We start in the admissions process, as opposed to, like you said, most colleges, the model is that when the student's admitted, they're admitted based on, say, test scores and GPA, maybe an essay. Then once the student's admitted, that student can supply, the documentation about their learning disability or whatever their disability is. And they supply it to, usually a disability services office. But they have to, like you said, they have to choose to go there, and then the disability services specialist will decide what accommodations that student might be able to be, admitted to have. And then the next step often is now the student has approval from the disability services office, but now they have to bring that documentation to each and every professor. And at large schools, often there are a lot of professors who might not totally understand learning disabilities. That's not their, primary area of expertise. And so then the actual administration of the accommodation is left up to the professor. And it can be very intimidating for a lot of students. Yeah. At Beacon, we differ in that from the very moment they apply, they submit an application, their psychoeducational evaluation, or IEP, and then we start assessing if they're a good fit for Beacon, if we can help them, and then what types of accommodations, what types of strengths and weaknesses each applicant has. And then once that student's admitted, it goes over to academic affairs and the learning specialists, and the profile of the student continues from there. So before the students even step foot on campus, we're already preparing to help them be successful with their accommodations.
And what kind of rate do you have, like, as far as graduation?
We have a 77% graduation rate.
That has to be pretty high.
It is really high.
It's amazing. Nationally, it's 56% right now.
Right.
Yes.
For, all undergraduate programs.
Yep.
And we have 77%.
Well, and I know that when I was choosing a college, my parents pushed me to kind of go to a smaller college because they wanted me to be more of a bigger fish in a little pond, as opposed to, and that one of the things that's very interesting to me is you're giving these kids opportunities to really be leaders that they wouldn't necessarily have
That's right.
if they were in a bigger school.
Absolutely.
And which will help them later on, because that confidence, when you have the confidence of knowing I can lead this. And
Correct.
And what's so wonderful about students with learning disabilities and ADHD is that often they're so much more creative than non-learning disabled or non-ADHD students. If you look at a lot of entrepreneurs, say Richard Branson, Charles Schwab, the founder of Kinko's and JetBlue, I mean, these very successful entrepreneurs have ADHD or a learning disability. And at Beacon, when they're given the chance to be leaders, their leadership skills are fostered, and they're allowed to kind of experiment with that creativity, and then be able to go and pursue either start a business or be a leader in an existing business after.
now, where do you get the students from?
Well, Brenda will answer that question because that's what she does.
She's admissions.
Yeah.
Yes, of course. Hello.
So we have students that come from all over the country. In fact, the majority, about 2/3 of our students, are not from Florida. And then we have also students who are international students.
Oh.
So from the Bahamas, Bermuda, Jordan. Yeah, we have students from all over.
So about 5% come from international spots.
Yeah. And because we are so unique, we're one of only 2 colleges in the nation that are exclusively for students with learning disabilities that are accredited. And you can get a bachelor's degree.
Right, so they can go on to real life. I know I've done tours of your facility, and I mean, I'm just so amazed with some of the things, like especially in your graphics art department, which is always the most impressive. I mean, you can go into a math room and kind of go, okay. But the graphic arts department, I mean, that's real as to, right now with technology, this is real life. I mean, this is what they can really do.
Oh, absolutely. Our digital media program is state of the art, and our the director of that program is amazing. She really prepares them for the future, for working in the corporate world. And she can choose to teach just about anywhere. Over the summer, she's taught at Stanford
And Harvard.
and Harvard, and she chooses to come and teach at Beacon.
This is where she wants to be. That's really cool. Now, I know I get to see that your students, and it seems like even more so lately over the last few years, are really getting a lot more involved in the community. Is that something that you all are pushing from the school level, or?
Yeah, we certainly are. Even in some of our academic classes, we encourage community service and may have an activity involving community service. We also have sororities and fraternities, and they are the ones that are really out there in the community doing this work, and they just are feel very rewarded by doing it.
Yeah. And I think a lot of our students have an intrinsic motivation to help the community because they themselves have experienced difficulties, you know, in their education, maybe even in clubs and organizations, and so they have this, you know, real desire to help.
Well, and I have always just really been impressed with the ones that have come out and helped with the different events that we have in the downtown, and they just always are so excited to be a part of things. And I also know that you all have an internship program. Can one of you tell us a little bit about that?
As part of their academics, all seniors have to take career development actually 2 career development classes in their senior year, and the internship is part of that class. And a lot of the students are placed, you know, locally, so they don't have to drive. Maybe the public library. We have 4 students working there right now in an internship. The Leesburg Museum, a lot of local places. So it's really nice that the community welcomes our students, and they do very well in their placements.
And something that we're working on now also is building more partnerships. So not only in the Leesburg community, but across the nation, because a lot of our students do come from out of state. That way they can, if they want to do an internship, say back in Atlanta or DC, we have companies that work very well with our students and with students with disabilities.
Well, and I'm sure you have a ton of them, but would you maybe share 1 or 2 of your success stories when it comes to maybe, you know, people graduating, I couldn't think of the word, graduating and moving on into employment? Tell us a little.
Sure, I'd like to tell you about a student, Megan, who was in the Human Services curriculum, and she graduated, and she went on to the University of North Florida to get a master's degree in special ed. And as part of that program, they also become applied behavioral analysts, which is really something I had always inspired to be, but never quite got there. So she's working on these degrees and certifications. She's working part-time to put herself through school, and it's just amazing what she's done. You know, we knew her from a first-year student, and it's just really exciting.
Yeah, and she's from Central Florida, so she's from right here, and has been able to really be successful after Beacon. I also think of one of our students who graduated a few years back, Jessica. When actually first hearing her story, my very first semester of teaching at Beacon really is what led me to fall in love with the college. I had an activity in class. Again, we do a lot of experiential learning where we had the students role-playing and practicing clinical interview skills. And so each student was supposed to talk about their first college experience, whether it was at Beacon or another college. And as the students were paired up and I walked around the class, I heard Jessica saying to her partner, well, I never thought I could go to college. In fact, when I was in high school, there were teachers who told me I was lazy and stupid, and that, you know, I'd be lucky if I graduated high school. And I, you know, kind of did a, what was that? You know, I mean, I didn't say it to her directly at that time, but I thought, a teacher called you lazy and stupid? And that student went on to be 3rd in her class. She was an amazing, I mean, she's
Actually, I think I know who you're talking about. Because she was one of the ones that kind of got involved in the downtown, too. Well, that's, and I know that, like, you know, Walt is one of your, is the vice president? Thank you. Walt Zielinski, and he is on a board where I work in my normal job, but he, you know, talks a lot about the college and has put a real face to it. And I know that, you know, he talks about their experiences that they're having normal college experiences, and that and that in some sense this is the first time where they're really the normal.
Yes.
Which, isn't it nice to feel like that sometimes?
Right.
You know, we all, that's a gift that we all want, you know.
Right. Yeah, every student has a learning disability or ADHD, so they, you know, they belong.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, I know what I was going to, I just all of a sudden lost my little track. When you were talking about internships, is there opportunity for, I mean, are you looking for other places in the community where students can do internships? Yeah, and if so, what do they need, you know, what types of businesses are you looking for, and where do they need to contact to be able to let?
Well, we're really interested in any business that thinks they have an opportunity for a senior in one of our programs. Kendall Pageant is our director of the Career Development Center, and Kelly Rogers works with him as a transition job coach. So either one of those people would be very willing to hear from anybody who would have something to offer.
And our students are very bright and creative, so employers can really, you know, be able to optimize those skills from our students. But we do, you know, they do have certain accommodations that might help them to be able to perform their job better. And our students, we work really hard at helping them to know how to self-advocate and say, you know what, I have dyslexia, but if I, you know, use my laptop, I have this software that helps me to be able to, you know, read the text. And, you know, as long as employers are willing to work with our students and provide those minimal accommodations and, you know, have an open mind, I think that they'll be really happy and the student will be successful.
Well, and in general, I mean, when you're in college, you have so many things that are happening at once, and it's such a life experience. And and if you take that aside from any other distraction or any other challenge that somebody may have, that in and of itself can be, you know, difficult. And plus, you know, you're dealing with the natural tendency of being not necessarily the most mature. Yeah, I think I don't ever want to go back. But if I did, I would do things so much differently. Well, I appreciate your time and really, you know, bringing to light Beacon College. I'm so grateful that we are, you know, Leesburg gets to have this and really something to be proud of in our community. And so I hope for 24 more years and 50 more years and so on and so forth.
Absolutely.
Thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is wonderful.